Hey, get ready. We are about to start.
Welcome to another District 109 Maltalink conference interview with one of our wonderful keynote speakers tonight. Tonight, we are thrilled to welcome a professor and expert in creative thinking and innovation. Professor Margaret Mangion is our guest, and she is the director of the Edward de Bono Institute at the University of Malta, which is of course, the city, the country, I should say, where we are having our wonderful conference. Besides lecturing at the university, her research on creativity and innovation has also led to her to work with a large blue chip company in England and to consult with many other organizations across Europe. Her keynote will focus on creativity in the age of AI. And tonight we will get to know Margaret more in the lead up to the conference. So please welcome Margaret Mangione. Thank you for joining us, Margaret. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Indeed. Just a quick ask here. What's the weather like in Malta? I assume you're in Malta now.
Oh, well, actually, as you can see, I'm wearing a cardigan, so it's not hot yet, but it's getting warmer by the day.
That's good to hear. I know many people will be watching this interview and, of course, watching on perhaps afterwards. And a wonderful evening to those who are joining us, of course, right now. So people who are joining right now, like Katja Burdett, good evening. You're welcome to share your thoughts, ask questions of Margaret as we go through. I have some questions that I've prepared, but of course, add your comments and thoughts as we go through. And we are being supported by the PR manager for the conference, Paula Purina. So thank you to Paula for supporting us backstage and highlighting anything that we'd like our listeners and those watching maybe to ask of Margaret as well. So Margaret, thank you again for your time. I'd like to ask by starting to ask you a little bit about your journey and your background. So how does one become a creativity researcher and academic?
Okay, that's a good question. So I might be perceived as a bit of a hybrid. Okay, so I'm not the academic who has constantly been in university life. So I think I can say I have the luxury of having the best of both worlds. So I spent some time, I was first a teacher. So I used to teach in a secondary school, but my dream was always to work in human resources. So eventually I worked in human resources in England. I worked for a large blue chip company there for a couple of years. And in the meantime, I was always finishing my doctorate. And when I came back to Malta, I started working at the university. Wow. So I think in life, you come across opportunities and it's a matter of recognizing them and seizing them. So the opportunity came along for me to land at the university, which also happened by accident. But
yeah, that's amazing. My late grandfather used to say, "Follow the green lights," and it sounds like you've had several green lights in this move from teacher to HR to your doctorate now to being a professor as well. So that's fantastic. And I saw you're in charge of the Edward de Bono Institute, but what other kind of areas are you lecturing in at the university?
Okay, so I am the director of the Edward de Bono Institute. We have been set up for 32 years. So we've been here a while. And here we explore 5 different disciplines. So creativity, within which possibility thinking, which is what we're talking about today, is one of them. So creativity, innovation management, entrepreneurship, future studies, and also critical thinking, which is much needed, particularly at this day and age.
Yeah.
So my areas of specialization would lie mainly in different aspects of creativity, as well as critical thinking and social innovation. Well, I have various interests, so
Yeah, that's amazing. I had a look at
they're all quite transversal, so you can marry them quite nicely,
Yes, absolutely. I had a little look, sneaking around, looking up your professional biography, of course, on the University of Malta website, and said a whole list of lectures, courses that you're involved with. Yeah. So there's quite a list there. So perhaps I don't know if they're open to the public, but certainly it looks like quite a diversity. And I've taken note for myself there as well. So I'd love you to maybe help those who are watching to define creativity from your research, from your lecturing, from your thoughts. And is it something that's changed over time? You know, what we thought of creativity 50, 100 years ago, or is it similar? So as you'd like to answer.
Okay, so this year we're celebrating the 75th anniversary from the Guilford speech, so which was when J.P. Guilford, as president of the APA, so the American Psychology Association, delivered a speech where he said in the 50s, there isn't enough research on creativity. And that's when it started speeding up. And back then, the main perspective on studies in creativity relied on the creative individual with particular characteristics associated to the individual, and also linking or hoping to establish a definition, which is still contested and contended from various perspectives, which primarily relies on different aspects in terms of originality, uniqueness of responses, appropriateness, and usefulness. And these were the main elements which we use to define creativity. These days, we look at it from a broader perspective, whether you're coming from a socio-cultural aspect or socio-cultural approach, where you look at creativity as being the interplay of the human and the environment within which that human works. Because the environment might provide some stimuli which can change the way we work and the way we become creative. And our output as creative beings can change that environment and vice versa.
That's really interesting. So these factors of uniqueness, appropriateness, and usefulness. Because many people, you know, I used to be a professional opera singer, and so people would say, "Oh, you're so creative," but you're right about it being me in the right environment to have the tools to play, use my voice, to be in a stage set up. So the environment really helped me to unleash that. Whereas if I were in an accountancy practice or a blue chip company or somewhere else, you know, my creativity would have to merge and move into a different area, I could imagine that.
Well, it depends, because your environment can either facilitate or inhibit creativity. So, for example, we see that very often people tend to be very creative when they're facing a constraint. So you need to create, you need to get out of it. So
Okay,
you
yeah.
try different ways, and it doesn't mean that your first answer is going to be the best answer. You stay fine-tuned. There's a whole process
Wonderful.
between understanding that you're solving something and actually coming down to finishing it off or doing it or being happy with the result. And that brings you to another aspect of creativity, which is the element of surprise. So a creative outcome is also surprising.
Like it could come from a spark of thought or a chance
Something
connection.
which your audience, something which your audience is not expecting, perhaps.
Yeah, wow. I guess good comedy has that element too of surprise, where it turns
Exactly.
the corner, and so it can feel very creative. Or I'm sure over time, you know, artists of all sorts pushed boundaries and created new artistic directions. I'm reminded of I heard of the Sistine Chapel. You know, took 2.5 years to paint, but it took thousands of hours more in preparation for those 2.5 years to create that right environment for that to occur. So I mean, that's already amazing for those listening in to think of that process. And I guess you'll explain more of that in your keynote. We don't want to give away your keynote tonight, but I would like to ask you from your outline of the speech, you mentioned possibility thinking. So I'd like to ask you, what is possibility thinking, and how might that apply to what people do at Toastmasters? Or you explain that, and I'll bridge it to Toastmasters in a minute, and we'll see where we get to together.
Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, so possibility thinking has been around for many years, but over the last few years, 5 years or so, it has been given a push forward. And we are seeing more and more of it across different disciplines. However, overall, it falls under the umbrella of creativity, generically speaking. So different aspects of possibility thinking within creativity. So what is it? Possibility thinking is essentially this willingness for us to engage with different, as the name implies, possibilities. The willingness to be open to explore different avenues, which might sound very simple or simplistic in terms of process. However, because very often you might take some constraints, either time or background, or sometimes the level of expertise of a person, our engagement with possibility thinking might be hampered by how we limit ourselves in terms of the willingness or the openness to perceive possibilities, different courses of actions. And in fact, when we talk about possibility thinking, we also refer to possibility spaces. So, allowing us to use these spaces to guide ourselves to think about possibilities. And this has a foundation in psychology. So, I mean, the way I like to explain this in class is to describe us as agents. So, when you're baking a cake, you normally use a raising agent. So you buy self-raising flour and you put in some baking powder and you have a nice fluffy cake. And
Yes.
without your raising agent, you're just going to get a flop. Okay, so we are the agent, so we're that baking powder to produce creativity, to produce creative outcomes by engaging with possibility thinking. So, by exploring possibilities, by creating these little niche spaces, these little possibility spaces for us to act creatively. So,
Okay.
that we create creative agency
Yes.
in order to address problems, which do not necessarily need to be problems. So they don't have to be problematic. We call
Yeah.
them as such because of the nature of the science. But they could be either observations stemming out from something. You mean you're walking down the street and say, if it were up to me, I would do this differently. Or even anticipating a scenario. Because very often you find yourself thinking about things that you want to do, places you want to get. But very rarely do we think about the places we don't want to get to.
Okay.
Okay, so when we're thinking about possibility thinking, we think about the what can be,
Okay.
the
But also what
what
can be.
what cannot be.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I mean one very simple example in which this could be done in class with children learning history, for example. The possibility thinking during a history lesson. So we know history because we read it in books and say, okay, so you take a particular anecdote. For example, Napoleon came to Malta and conquered Malta for 2 years. So what has been, this is history, this is what we have on paper, but what could never be? What were the possibilities that could never take place? Or what could be? What could have been done differently? How could history be changed? And these are different elements that can be brought around through play. There's this playful element, which, because we're adult and we do adulting, very often we forget. And when we do that, we do not give ourselves the space to be creative because we go with the actual or with the
Yeah.
factual.
Right.
So
We define the possibilities in a limited way,
what
perhaps
is allowed and what is not allowed?
a little bit of
You
boxing.
know, what is going to raise eyebrows or what will go without any comments whatsoever. And sometimes we settle for, the second
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's
That's
more
really
convenient.
convenient. That's right. So the spaces, I guess, are the psychological spaces that we allow for ourselves. You mentioned before. possibility space.
Yes,
Yeah.
either psychological spaces or else, for example, we were collecting some data about this last year, and we worked with a group of teachers. So we introduced possibility thinking, we taught them how they could use possibility thinking in class. But then these spaces, the possibility spaces, were teaching them techniques
Mm-hmm.
about how they could engage with the possible. So essentially, what happens here is a deliberate attention to engaging with possibility thinking.
Okay. Yeah. Right. So it's really a practice, a skill that we can become aware of. So maybe through your
Yes.
keynote, people can learn more about and come away with some techniques that they can really practice in their daily lives that might really help forge possibility thinking. I've written so many notes. I'm so
Okay,
excited.
that's good.
There's quite a lot now. Elizabeth Jordan's joining us. She's one of our senior Toastmasters, and she said here that possibility thinking Toastmasters offer this, and I guess it does, because many people come to Toastmasters firstly with a need to improve their public speaking. That might be the main reason they've come, but through joining our wonderful organization, they start to realize and see where else they could apply their skills, talents, and what else they could learn. So coming to the conference, for instance, I'm sure will be a wonderful possibility space in which people can understand and see what others are doing with their Toastmasters journey. So it creates and stimulates the thinking that we have here as well. So Katja, an ideal alchemist. So I guess it's that merging of
Yes.
ideas, new possibilities, and also knowing what's not possible. So but not being so boxed into constraining yourself, if I've understood you correctly.
Yes, but what is not possible does not
Mhm.
always have to mean something that we will not do. So if
Okay.
the current conditions might not make it possible for something to happen, then
Yeah,
what might we want to change to make
yes.
it happen? In
Yeah,
fact,
that's
when I teach creative thinking,
mhm,
or when I facilitate creative thinking in organizations,
mhm,
I said that coming up with new ideas is only the starting point.
mhm.
Because very often, what we forget to invest in is dressing up that idea, being able to sell it. And to be
Mm,
able to sell an idea, you need to understand what will make it go or what will be the hampering stages that can potentially make it fail.
yeah,
So you need to see who's working with you and who might work against you in that
yeah,
respect.
yeah,
So the what might not be or what can be a possibility should not stop you from going for that idea, but it should be able to help you equip yourself to
yeah,
anticipate.
yeah. Wonderful.
If they-
Wow, wow. Well, I feel like I'm learning so much already in just a short amount of time. Thank you, Margaret. I have a question here because your presentation at the conference will be also around this interaction, creativity with AI, and many of us now know and have used AI, where there's tools out there that can help Toastmasters, but also help us in our own lives. So, how do you feel about AI, and what impact do you see it having on society in the future?
Okay, so this is a double-edged sword because, and I think sometimes we're a bit short-sighted in how we interpret it because it's facilitating things so much.
Mm,
Everything is much easier, everything is much more, let's say, efficient in terms of time.
mhm,
Things are becoming perhaps more economical. I can
yeah,
do more in less time.
mhm,
My concern is about the skills that we might leave behind at the expense of salvaging or making more
okay.
time to do more rather than, how can I explain this? Perhaps engagement with AI can empower us. So it is a driver. It can help you to feel better in the driver's seat, but you still need to know your foundations.
Mm,
Because if the lights go out, you need to be able to carry on.
yes.
So I think that there are different ways in which we can look at it. In fact, with quite a large group of researchers were looking at it from different perspectives, but there's the utopian aspect where AI will facilitate matters, medical, healthcare, work, the works essentially, you know. But on the other hand, there's the dystopian element where it will cause potentially chaos, the excessive use of AI, and how we as being might end up reduced as puppets, you know, of the robots. So the robot might replace the human, you know. So I think this will be a very interesting concept for us to explore, because so far we have been always talking about the human being at the center of things. But if we keep on using AI without investing in our skills, without upgrading our skills, my fear from the dystopian perspective would be that we will no longer be indispensable. So all this work that we put in to develop the creative self and possibility thinking, you know, might end up, you know, being futile in the
Yeah.
end. Let's say 10 years down the line, what will happen 10 years down the line? And that's how we can engage with possibility thinking.
Yeah.
So what can be?
Yeah.
What can never be? What is unimaginable? So we design scenarios in this way to see where we want to get to, but also what we want to avoid.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, we cannot, now that we had a taste of it, we cannot imagine a world without AI. I mean, we've had it for many, many years, and people didn't really know about it because it grew on us. And then the minute generative AI became
Yes.
so widely used, that's
Yeah.
how people started to use an AI platform rather than a search engine
Yes.
to look something up. You know,
Yes.
so eventually this will become, you know, normal
As
practice
there is
like
Google
anything
searching.
else.
Yeah.
You know? So it would be interesting to see where we want to get to or where we do not want to get to by making a deliberate effort
Yeah.
and creating this possibility space to think
Yes.
about it
That makes
rather
sense.
than, you know, be carried away. There's a momentum. It's very
Yeah.
easy to be carried away.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
don't stop. Earlier at the beginning, I've said that it is very important for us to hone in on critical thinking. And there was
Yes.
never a better time for us to think critically.
Yes.
Because ultimately, the machines know a lot because they have been fed a lot.
Yes.
But do
Yes.
they know it all, or is the argument always coherent? So, unless you know your basics, unless you know your facts, you will
Yeah.
not understand that.
Yeah. You mentioned the foundations before. So I'm hearing critical thinking, creativity, I guess decision making is in there, your emotional intelligence, your ability to reason and not just blindly accept what the AI is telling you, and to allow and have confidence, coming back to possibility thinking, that confidence in yourself to be able to say, hang on, there could be another possibility, an even better one, but let's explore that, rather than just saying, well, we've got what we want, time is of the essence, let's get on to the next project. So that's really interesting. Thank you.
I mean, mind you, AI can generate an infinite, not infinite, but a very long list of alternatives,
Yeah. Yeah.
potentially more than us,
Yes.
because it's putting together. I mean, I am just me if I had to do a creativity test. So
Yes.
I'm coming up with my own background and my own responses. But
Yes.
AI would be harvesting the responses of millions,
That's true. That's true. And
you
if it's
know? So
new data and information as the world evolves, then of course it evolves with it as well. That's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. I just want
yeah.
to double back on Paula showed us a couple of comments before from Diane Richardson, who mentioned that working as a designer, she finds that the best briefs are those that explain the problem, but don't tell me how to solve the problem for the best solution. So allowing her to be creative. And she equates that to our pathways, which is where in pathways, Margaret, people follow a stream of projects where the project brief is given, do a 5 to 7 minute speech explaining who you are, but that's it. And then you have to be creative to come up with where and how you will answer that brief. So there's not a standard way. Many people think that Toastmasters is providing a kind of like a cheat sheet almost of how to give speeches and public speak and moderate and so forth. But actually, I think Diana's right that we get the possibility to here's the instruction. Now go away and design what you would like to. So possibility thinking, I think, was where that came in when we were talking before. Diane was really referencing that. So thank you. And yeah, it says here they therefore makes us creative with speeches rather than just starting from scratch. That the parameter at least gives us some container to work with. Like when we feed an AI, we say, I want this, I want that, or give me some output related to this, and let's go from there. So quite interesting. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I think that one thing I tell my students is that they need to explore many different things in life for them to be able to, store them all and then be able to pick and choose which situation fits best to solve a potential problem.
Yeah,
So
right.
in this case, you were referring to Diane. Yes, I mean, when you're put together, when you put on the spot, the 5 to 7 minutes,
Yes.
it's important for that person to bring out all they can, potentially relate to metaphors, anecdotes,
Yes.
anything that can make that conversation richer, to
Yes.
attract attention, anchor your audience,
Yes.
and hone them in.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't happen by itself. So you
No.
have to have the gift, but you also have to have the skill, the craft to put it all together.
Yes, that's it. That's it. And that's what really Toastmasters is about, is helping to develop that skill. As you mentioned, possibility thinking too is a practice. It's something that we have to invest time and development in, which is great. So this really leads nicely to one of my last questions here, Margaret, which is really around that creative element for an impromptu speech. So, but of course, we also have our evaluations, which I haven't mentioned, which is where we've watched a speech and then really on the spot, we have about 3 or 4 minutes to prepare some notes. And then we have to give a 1 to 2.5 minute speech that evaluates the speech of somebody else that was given beforehand. Now, of course, again, I think creativity, hops into all these areas. So do you have any pieces of advice that maybe those watching now or watching later or meeting you at the conference, maybe they have a question, but what advice could you give them, maybe just to help them unleash some of their creativity before your keynote?
So, in terms of putting together the evaluation, you mean?
Or just to, I guess I'm thinking more generally. So just to give you
Okay.
the full frame of reference, evaluation is
Yeah.
another sort of creative impromptu speech that we have. But
Okay. I think some people have this notion that creativity is all over the place, that
mhm,
you're inspired, the bulb lights up and you're creative. But it
mhm,
hardly ever is like that. So there are a number of skills, many of which you can find freely online,
yeah,
that would help you to navigate throughout. It's a process.
mhm,
So you earlier you hinted at the process. So you understand what you want to do. You
yeah,
typically see whether you have enough information about what it is that you want to do, whether you need more information, more knowledge, expertise, and so on.
mhm,
And that helps you to recalibrate and redefine what you're working on, what your goal is.
mhm,
And then you start to think about solutions. So when you're starting to think about solutions, do you want to go down the conventional way? Or do you want to perhaps explore some different tools that can help you generate surprising alternatives
yes,
that have not been tried before? So, how do you attract your audience, their attention for you to be able to score higher in a Toastmasters competition, perhaps?
mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
And then you have to be able to evaluate your own work, which is
Mm,
a bit tricky because when it's your own work, it's a little bit difficult to see any downsides with it.
mhm,
It's
yeah,
your project. So, but it's important for us to try and be objective in this case.
yeah. Okay, I love that. That's amazing. Yes, because there'll be people preparing for the competitions that you may witness while you're there at the conference. The people who have gone from club to area to division and now at the district level. This is the highest level in Europe. And so, these people, and some will go on in the prepared speech in English, perhaps to the World Championships, and they have to say the same speech as they get higher and higher. So the creativity, I wouldn't say dries up, but it changes because the box changes a little bit. So I love that. Evaluate your own work and really be objective. So we often encourage people to videotape themselves as an example. Do your speech, do it again. Look between, how can you get that feedback from those you trust, but also feedback from those who you don't know, because you find out some of those surprises. So you're used to your own club, whereas now you're in a bigger pool of people. So but I love that. That's a process, and really understand first. Look at what you need or what you have, and then redefine that goal. And then, look for solutions. And it's through that solution finding that you either approach it conventionally or in a different way that ultimately gives you some results. So, wow.
And there's this element of fine-tuning. So an offering is not perfect the minute you come up with the idea. So you test it and you see what works. So when, as you mentioned, this example of a person going through different levels within Toastmasters, I mean, the trick that that person can use to better themselves, because as you go up, the bar is raised. Okay, so the most important thing is to be able to look back, evaluate and recalibrate and see where it is that you can fix, to improve, to enhance. So this fine tuning, which becomes more difficult as you go, but necessary to excel.
Oh, I love that. So let's hope our contestants are watching and valuing your advice, Margaret. And as they go higher in the pyramid, let's see where they go. So I would invite you to come and to witness some of the magic that you'll see in the conference, not only for your own workshop, of course, but the other competitors, and to see, there may be future research studies that perhaps you could have participants willing to support you in, which would be wonderful. So really, thank you for joining.
We offer a master program and a PhD, so anyone is willing to join us.
Right. I'll be looking that up myself. I'll talk to you later about that. But Margaret,
shameless promotion,
Yes, shameless promotion. And of course, I guess if people out there and they'd like to talk to you after your keynote, maybe they can connect with you personally. And of course, heading on to your workshop, I think, will be the most important thing. I'm sure that many will be signing up and coming and partaking in that, which is truly fantastic. So from us here at the conference interview team, I want to say thank you, Margaret, for joining us tonight. And thank you to those who are watching on. We see Diane, Lillian, Katya, Elizabeth, and so forth, and maybe many others who will see this recording between now and, of course, our wonderful Maltalink conference. So for those who haven't booked their tickets, please do. Paula assures me that there are tickets, but you never know how expensive flights and accommodation will be. So do organize those now. And the conference will take place at the DoubleTree by Hilton in Malta from May 15th to the 18th of this year. There are several keynotes, of which Margaret is one. There are workshops. There are also panel discussions, and of course, other events there as well. So thank you again, Margaret. And we do hope that
thank you, David.
Enjoyed your time with us.
Thank you. I wanted to thank you for having me this evening. And I look forward to meeting as many of you as I possibly can during the conference. I think you're staying at a lovely location, so it would be really great. And May is a beautiful time of the year in Malta. So,
that's perfect.
Looking forward to seeing you all then.
Thank you all, and we'll see you all again. Good evening and good night.
Good evening.